Are you ready for chapter 16? I know I am. I can't wait to find out what happens to Mr. Popper and his penguins. This one, chapter 16, is called On the Road. During the next day, there was much to be done at 432 Proudfoot Avenue. There were new clothes to buy for all of them, and the old ones to pack away in mothballs. Then Mrs. Popper had to scrub and polish and straighten the whole place, for she was much too good of a housekeeper to leave everything at 6s and 7s while the Poppers were away. Mr. Greenbaum sent them their first week's pay in advance. The first thing they did was pay off the man who had installed the freezing plant in the basement. He had been getting rather uneasy about his money, and after all, without him, they could have never trained the penguins. Next, they sent a check to the company who had been shipping the fresh fish all the way from the coast. At last, everything was done, and Mr. Popper turned the key in the door of the little house. They were a little late at arriving at the railway station on account of the argument with the traffic policeman. The argument was on account of the accident to two taxicabs. With 4 Poppers and 12 penguins, not to mention the 8 suitcases and a pail of water with live fish for the penguins' lunch, Mr. Popper found that they could not all fit into one cab, so he had to call a second one. Each of the taxi drivers was eager to be the first one to get to the station and surprise the people there by opening the door of his cab and letting out 6 penguins. So the 2 cab drivers raced each other all the way, and in the last block they tried to pass each other, and one of the fenders got torn off. The traffic officer naturally was very much annoyed. The train was about to pull out of the station when they finally arrived. Even with both taxi drivers helping them through the gate and over the brass rails and onto the rear observation platform, they just barely made it. The penguins were gasping. It had been decided that Mr. Popper should ride in the baggage car with the penguins to keep them from getting nervous, while Mrs. Popper and the children would ride in one of the Pullmans. Because of getting on at the observation end of the train, Mr. Popper had to take the birds the whole length of the train. It was easy enough getting them through the club car, even with the pail of fish to carry. In the sleeping cars, however, where the porter was already making up some of the berths, there was trouble. The porter's ladders offered much too much temptation for the penguins. There was a dozen happy orks from a dozen eccentric beaks. Popper's performing penguins completely forgot their discipline, and they fought to climb the ladders and get into the upper berths. Poor Mr. Popper. One old lady screamed that she was getting off the train, whether it was going 90 miles an hour or not. A gentleman wearing a clergyman's collar suggested opening a window so that the penguins could just jump out. 2 porters tried to shoo the birds out of the berths. Finally, the conductor and the brakesman came with a lantern, and they came to the rescue. It was quite a while before Mr. Popper got his pets safely into the baggage car. Mrs. Popper worried a little at the start over the idea of having taken Janie and Bill out of school and having them miss 10 weeks of school while they were on the road, although the children didn't seem to mind. "And you must remember, my love," said Mr. Popper, who had never even been out of Stillwater before, in spite of his dreams of distant countries, "travel is very broadening." Boy, I know how Mrs. Popper feels being worried about being out of school for so long, don't you? All right, here's a picture of the penguins climbing up into the berths. Can you tell from this picture what a berth is? All right, there it is. So a berth is what they call in a train, where they call the sleeping spaces, and there's it's kind of like bunk beds, if you will, and they've got a curtain that covers them. Can you see it? All right. Excuse me. From the start, the penguins were a riotous success. Even their opening performance in Seattle went off without a hitch, probably because they had already rehearsed on a real stage. It was here that the penguins added a little novelty number of their own to the program. They were the first thing on the bill. When they finished their regular act, the audience went wild. They clapped and stomped and roared for more of Popper's performing penguins. Janie and Bill helped their father herd the penguins off the stage so that the next act could go on. The next act was a tightrope walker named Monsieur Duval. The trouble was, instead of watching him from the wings like they should have done, the penguins were so interested that they walked right out on the stage again to watch him more closely. Unfortunately, at this very moment, Monsieur Duval was doing a very difficult dance on the wire overhead. The audience, of course, had thought that the penguins were all through, and they were very much pleased to see, hang on, I gotta turn a page, to see them return and line up with their backs to the audience and look up at Monsieur Duval dancing so carefully on the wire high above them. Look at this picture. We haven't gotten to this part yet, but I can guess from this picture what might happen here. Look at this tightrope walker. He doesn't look to be very happy. And there's the penguins watching him because they were so curious. This made everyone laugh so hard that Monsieur Duval lost his balance. Oh, now I know why he was angry. "Ork," said the penguins, waddling very hurriedly away in order not to have to be under him when he fell. Cleverly recovering his balance, Monsieur Duval caught the wire by the inside of his elbow and saved himself. He was very angry when he saw the Popper performing penguins standing wide, opening wide their 12 beaks like they were laughing at him. "Go away, you things," he said to them in French. "Ork," said the penguins, pretending not to understand, and making remarks to each other in penguin language about Monsieur Duval. And whenever they appeared, the more they interfered with the other acts on the program, the better the audience liked them. Oh my goodness. I think the other performers don't like them, but the audience likes it. Oh, and that was the end of that chapter. So we will hear chapter 17 next week, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend and can get out and enjoy the sunshine.